Good morning. I'm State Representative Bill Adolph, and I want to thank everyone for being here today. It's certainly my honor and privilege to be here in Upper Darby Township, along with some of my colleagues. With me is Senator Tom McGarrigle and State Representative Jamie Santora. Each of these elected officials standing with me today believes it's important to make sure that we adequately fund our schools in a fair and equitable way. You know, when I first started in Harrisburg 2 decades ago, my good friend and then Speaker of the House, Matt Ryan, told me that the most important vote that you make in Harrisburg is the state budget. And I think everybody here today thinks that funding of education is the most important aspect of the state budget. I'd like to just go on the record that the budget that Governor Wolf allowed to become law has a committed record of education funding, $10.74 billion for Pennsylvania's pre-K education. I'll just repeat that, $10.74 billion out of a $30 billion budget. This is clearly a record investment in education. At no point in the Commonwealth's history has this much money been spent in public education. And that includes the year and a half that we received federal stimulus money of close to $3 billion. I know throughout the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, most people believe that the budget impasse is over. And I understand the confusion. And I was very, very pleased when the governor allowed the budget to become law. However, when the governor then announced that he was going to veto the fiscal code, as glad as I was that the budget, the GA bill became law, I was that disappointed that he was vetoing the fiscal code. Because that is the guidebook. That explains to the governor the amount of money that each school district should be receiving, the formula that should be used, as well as funding for our human services, our hospitals, and a lot of agricultural line items. So it was very disappointing that the governor vetoed the fiscal code. And to the best of my knowledge, this is the first time that was ever done in the Commonwealth's history. By vetoing the fiscal code, there was no formula that allowed the administration to drive out the necessary funds. I have sat with the governor on many occasions, and I've explained to the governor over and over again how important it is to have a fair and equitable funding formula for basic education. And that for a year and a half, we had a bipartisan commission meet all over the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, rural Pennsylvania, suburban Pennsylvania, urban Pennsylvania, from Erie to South Philadelphia, to try to understand the needs of our school districts. After a year and a half of meetings, that commission voted in a bipartisan way to establish a fair and equitable way to distribute education. The governor, and only the governor, decided to come up with a hybrid plan which picked winners and losers when it came to funding education, as compared to not something that the House Republican caucus came up with, the House Democratic caucus came up with, the Senate Republican caucus came up with, the Senate Democrat caucus came up with, a bipartisan commission came up with. This formula, ladies and gentlemen, is fair and equitable. And when the governor proposed to send out a different formula that he has stood by since first being elected, he vetoed the fiscal code. We have been working to solve an issue in basic education for a couple decades. It's called hold harmless. Hold harmless. And it sounds great. It sounds great. And it guarantees every school district in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania the same dollar amount that they received the year before. However, over the years and over the decades, if school districts declined in enrollment under this hold harmless provision, they still received the same amount of money. And we have school districts in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania that has 50% enrollment as compared to what they had in the mid-1980s. Think about that. I would highly recommend those that are interested to find out regarding this hold harmless issue to get a copy of the policy brief that was prepared by the Center on Regional Politics. It's an excellent article, and it explains how Pennsylvania is one of the few states left in the United States to use this hold harmless provision. Now, this commission, this bipartisan commission, knew they had to work through that. You're not going to change funding for school districts overnight. But this funding commission formula would start heading in the right direction. So 2 decades from now, we will not be facing this type of distribution problem. I'm urging the governor to sign the fiscal code so we can finally put to end this budget impasse and start negotiating for next year's budget.